You're listening to the Gutsy Podcast, where we talk about all things real, raw, and ridiculous about running a business authentically. Whether you need an inspirational pick-me-up or a swift kick in the mental ass, the Gutsy Podcast is your bi-weekly guide to getting out of your head and back into action. I'm Laura Ora, branding and mindset coach for female entrepreneurs, CEO of Works & Co., and your host on this journey through entrepreneurship. It's time to fuel your gutsy. Does every day feel like a professional game of whack-a-mole? Lots of hurry up, figure out, and reach out, only to be left with the same chaos waiting for you tomorrow. If you are craving simplicity and organization in your business, today's episode is for you. We're chatting with Sandra Halling about embracing strategy and systems in your business. Hear me out. Ones that bring ease and flow into your life. As the founder of the Data Mavens, Sandra is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and executives design their workflow and systems to feel organized, have peace of mind, and prioritize what matters to them. Sandra is an expert on platforms like Deltek Vision, Notion, and Clickup, but her real priority is helping you develop better work habits by achieving something I love so much, aligned productivity. That is to say, aligning your work with your values. Today, we're talking about chaos and creating freedom from within. So before we talk to Sandra, let's first take a self-awareness check. Where do you feel consistently chaotic in your life? Is it your job, your home life, your business, your health, your friendships, your social life? What constantly feels like you are beating your head up against a wall? If there is something in your life on a daily basis that is causing you frustration, drains your energy, feels like a have to versus a get to, and just takes all your motivation and throws it out the window, this could be a very, very clear indication that you may be out of alignment. Look, there are seasons of hard. Sometimes things are challenging or you have to overcome an obstacle. That's a regular part of life. But consistently feeling drained and lacking motivation is not. In case you're new around here, my name is Laura Ora, and I'm an alignment coach for female entrepreneurs and for people that feel a calling for more. My role and goal is to help guide you back to your own version of alignment, to say yes to yourself, to do the things that you feel called to do, even if no one else understands it, and to start trusting those intuitive downloads that you're getting. Look, every single thing that you see and feel and desire in your life is on the other side of saying yes to yourself. If you're feeling the tug for more, I encourage you to go to lauraora.com and sign up for a discovery call. In 30 minutes together, you would be amazed at what we can discover about what's going on in your life, what the very next step that you can take is, and how I can support you along your journey. I know that Sandra has amazing nuggets of wisdom to share with you today, so let's get into this week's episode. Sandra, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. What's led you to where you are today?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So
it's never a straight line.
Yeah. The loaded first question. So I actually started my career right out of high school. I worked my way through college, and I started in the architectural and engineering industry in marketing, of all things. And it looks very different than the online marketing that we're used to now. But I had a head for the technical side of it and the systems that support it. And so eventually I ended up transitioning from doing the actual marketing part to doing marketing systems. And then that led to doing more operational workflow, and fast forwarding quite a ways through my journey. I did that as an employee for a long time, and then left in 2011 and started my business and started doing that as an independent consultant for the same type of industry, professional service firms, and mostly working on Deltek Vision at the time, which is a large scale ERP system and enterprise planning system. And in the process of doing that, I learned a lot about how to integrate things. But also, I tell it as a funny story now, in the sense that my job was basically to teach people who really didn't want to be in the room how to use a system that they really didn't like. And
super easy job.
Exactly. So like, there's nothing quite like trying to convince people that a piece of technology really does do what it promises to do, and convincing them that they'll get value and benefit out of using it, as a situation like that. So with the pandemic, I transitioned to working more with entrepreneurs because I realized my systems and strategy brain was such a good fit for helping people scale, and I take a much more holistic and gentle view about systems and structure. And I think it's supposed to be there to support our flow, not to constrain us. It's the box you stand on. It's not meant to be a jail or a prison or overly constrictive, because that, to me, that defeats the purpose. So that's sort of the journey and how I got to where I am.
Well, I love that you already started talking about what it's not. And that's why in the intro I said, hear me out. Because as soon as I say strategy and systems, people are like, peace out, I'm out of here. Because it does get a bad rap, right? Mm-hmm. About like, I can only do things this one certain way, and it's constraining me and it's backing me in a corner. What are some other things that you hear typically why people are pushing back?
A lot. I have a fair number of clients who, they're intuitive by nature, or they're running a more spiritual business. And so they want to use a notebook. They want to keep their bullet journal, for Pete's sake, right? Which, yep. You take that to some systems people, and they'll basically take it away from you. But I love handwriting. I think long handwriting is a brilliant and beautiful thing. And in the community that I run, we talk a lot about how, one of the pieces of aligned productivity, the community, is we do a weekly review on Fridays, along with a bunch of other focus blocks. But the weekly review in particular, where we're checking in with our productivity, we get a lot of Notion users in there, a lot of Obsidian users. But I actually do mine by hand at this point. And it's shocking to me how much the information that I sort of pull up from my intuition, writing things out, is just very different than what I do when I'm typing it out. And so I think there's a place for all of the tools. And I think longhand journaling is a tool that we can use. So getting back to the original question, is like, what do I hear? Well, I hear different things like, that tool doesn't work for me, or this process doesn't work for me. And I think it really is both an exploration and an experiment that needs to happen to find the right mix of tools, and also like differentiating between what's a tool and what's a process. And like, there's lots of terms, I think, that get thrown around, and they're not always very well defined, like tools and process and workflow and pathway. They all mean different things to me. And I think that integrating them, defining them, and then integrating them and finding your own path forward is really an important piece. And doing that intentional experimentation, that is strategic. That's strategic systems right there.
See, it's immediately it's so easy to think of something that's very dry and bland and like all that, but what you just explained is not. I mean, it's really open to exploring, like you said, long handwriting. I'm with you. I can get so much more down and out through my hand than I can on my computer, because I think that sometimes, and for me, this is just for me, but sometimes the technology stifles that flow.
Yeah, and it can.
You need to just kind of sometimes work things out on paper before you go into a tool or a product, or creating things beyond just kind of the initial dump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, I think there's a place for all of these pieces, and it's finding where to plug it into your business. And like to sort of put a bow on that little piece right there, a tiny bow, I would say that like being willing to do that experimentation and do that long form handwriting is a way of creating that freedom that we're all looking for as entrepreneurs to begin with.
Mm, so true. You talked about kind of defining what some of these things are, like tools versus processes and things like that. Could you educate us? Just kind of give
Yeah.
us like the high notes of what each of these things mean?
Yeah, let's walk through it a little bit. Okay, so to me, a tool is actually like a technical system or app. So Notion is a tool, Clickup is a tool, Microsoft Excel is a tool, Zoom is a tool, right? You could say application or software, I think interchangeably with the word tool in the way that I use it. When I say workflow, what I mean is the process that a particular task or project goes through from idea or inception to completion. So, like if you have podcast production as a task or a project, the workflow would be to, like, obviously there's nuances here, but recording the episode, editing the episode, publicizing the episode, and then publishing it, right? Like there's pieces, there's steps to that process. That's workflow. Whereas pathway is more the exact steps that you or I, as individuals, or entrepreneurs as individuals, go through in a particular tool or a particular system to get an outcome. So a pathway could be where you start your day in the morning. Like I start my day usually in Obsidian, where I write out some notes about what my priorities are for the day. And then I navigate to ClickUp, and then there's Slack and email. And so I'm jumping between each of these tools, right? And in each of these tools, I know where I go first, second, third. So like taking Slack, for example, I always check the threaded messages first and just sort of skim through that, because usually you'll kind of get a sense of what the updates are. And then maybe I'm checking my DMs or particular channels that I know are important. So there's a pathway within each app and a larger pathway of like, where are you starting your day? Where are you ending your day? Like, and I think all of those, while it's getting like kind of fine grained, if you will, the value of that is that when you are having a rough day, you can be on automatic pilot. I always say people want to like define their systems. And I'll add the definition for systems in here too. Systems is basically like integrating all of those things together. So your system could be partly the tool, partly the workflow that you're putting your tasks through, but also the pathway that you're using to knit those two things together. And that is a system. It's multiple pieces. So tying these things together, having a sense of where you're starting and ending, it just lowers the bar. So rather than trying to plan whether it's content creation or marketing or even delivery of a product for a client, rather than planning it for what our best day looks like, our most energy, where our kids slept through the night and our puppies are happy and snoozing in the sun and all of the things are working. Like, what if we plan it for the day that the kid is sick and the cat vomited on the rug, and like the crazy day where no one slept and nothing's right and you just ran out of milk and coffee at the same time. like can you plan your systems to work on that day? And that's where the ease starts to come in.
I love it. Thank you for explaining those things, because even listening to you talk, I can see how easily they could be skewed or crossed over to one another. So it's helpful to have kind of the basis of what we're talking about today. Why do you need these things? Like, especially, most of the people listening are entrepreneurs. And some might even say, well, I'm just a one person business or a two person business. Why do I need these things?
I think the short answer is you don't always. If you have a one person business, and it is predominantly what I would call a lifestyle business, in that you're not trying to scale to some larger version of what it is right now. You like the size and the way that it's operating. There's nothing wrong with having. I've seen some of the most organized entrepreneurs I know, they work out of a 3-ring binder. It doesn't mean that there's not process involved. Like, there's still an intention around how are we approaching the various areas of our business and dividing our time between marketing, sales, delivery, etc. There's intention, and there might be processes in each of those areas, but it doesn't mean that it can't be on paper. I think where the rubber hits the road in terms of does it need to be digital is a different question. And that's where, if you're running an online business or a predominantly remote business and you want to work with other people, well, now we're talking and now we're saying, hey, we need a tool that's going to help us work better together that is online.
Got it. So I love that, listen, guys, if you're running out of a 3-ring binder or you have your own notes and it's working for you, then that's fantastic. I would imagine, though, if you're really tuning into this episode, it's probably because there's some level of chaos that needs ironed out, right? That's the topic, is creating freedom from chaos. And to your point, when you're working with other people, I think, and I have found that that's really when documentation and creating processes and finding the right tools are imperative for not just growth, but day-to-day operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and you bring up a good point too, like about where does the order from chaos or the freedom from chaos come into play here, right? And I think it does boil down to collaboration. And I like to create a lot of grace up front for those of us that deeply want to have our business in a bullet journal. Like, I don't think that needs to get thrown out with the bathwater. So I always like to lay that as a foundation. And then from there, it's like, even the people who want to operate that way, there are still elements that could make your life easier if it were digital. There are still probably things you do for clients that would be easier if they were online. And so that's where I think plugging in tools like a project management system, and maybe this is part of where we go with this conversation, is just what are the basic tools that really serve entrepreneurs? And I think project management system is at the very top of that list as sort of a foundational thing, because it can serve both as a home base for planning your day, planning your month, planning your week, quarter, whatever time frame you want to block it out at, and also the documentation of process that you were talking about, the standard operating procedures as well.
Yeah, I love it. I love taking the conversation in this direction, because it's almost like, okay, so what do I need? Like, what are some project management tools? And just kind of take us down the road of what are some great things for entrepreneurs to utilize.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so at a baseline, it sort of depends on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey, right? But at a baseline, I think having a project management system, and this is going to sound kind of funny, but I talk to a lot of coaches in particular that are just starting to get traction, and then they suddenly realize that all the pieces of their business aren't actually talking to each other. So Google Calendar doesn't really work the way they need it to, or they still have some emails going to their old personal Gmail address and they don't know how to connect the dots. And so I think there's some value in having just the baseline things working and talking together that can really make your day-to-day experience edge toward ease as opposed to feeling hard. It's like when you're running between meetings and nothing is working smoothly, that's when that kind of gap in your technical setup can really, impact your day, impact your mood, impact your experience of running your business when everything feels hard. So I think having just really baseline, and I know this totally sounds obvious for some people, but I've seen it more often than you would imagine. And that is just making sure your calendar really works and your email is integrated, and you know the shortcuts in Gmail to make your life easier, that you have a process for managing that baseline administrivia, if you will, that smooths the process for things later. Because then the next thing that happens is that you probably want to bring one or two people into your business, probably a VA or someone to help with operations, and then someone to help with delivery, are usually the first two hires. And so as soon as you have those on the team, you definitely need a project management system. And then also, what are you handing off? You're probably handing off some of that administrative work. And so if all of those pieces are not working together, then you're kind of handing mush off to your new VA, as opposed to handing off something that already works reasonably well that they can leverage and run with.
Absolutely. That's where that chaos is, right? It's not always like some big monumental, like, oh, I'm having like a meltdown today, which, we all have. But it's in those little like quirks, right?
Yes.
When the calendar's not integrated with the website, or the email's not integrated with the form, and like just those little nuances that like, kind of like poke at you. It's like, they're like having splinters.
It is a little like having a technical splinter. I like that analogy. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, can you operate? Absolutely. Can you keep going? Absolutely. Are you going to think about it every time? You're damn right you are.
That's right. And then like, what is that impacting? Is that impacting just your experience, or is that impacting your client's experience? Because that's when, flag on the play, like we want that experience to be as smooth as possible. So once you have a PM system and like the administrative pieces are working, I think the next place to go from there is probably either sales or marketing, depending on the structure of the business. You can have systems, and I think this is where we start into getting into the difference between a system and a tool, right? I think in terms of delivering services, what you need there is process. So we need to say, okay, these are our core offers. This is who they are serving. This is the problem they are solving. Here is the process that we are taking them through. What is step 1, step 2, step 3, so on. And you can have a unique process for actually delivering the work, but also onboarding them once they've given you a yes in whatever your sales process is, and offboarding them once you've wrapped the project up too. And so those are systems, and in the sense that they're going to have multiple pieces, multiple tools, multiple processes with them. And it might all be outlined in a Google document. It doesn't have to be fancy, but a little bit of intention can go a long way when we're starting to put these things in place.
Yes, onboarding. Let's talk about that, because I think that's often and easy to overlook, but that is something that you can systemize to work smarter, not harder. And it's one of those things where it's like wash, rinse, repeat, right? You don't have to. I think one of the challenges with not having a process in place is you're kind of recreating the wheel each time. Oh, I need to do these 3 things. Oh, I forgot to do that one though, or you're doing something totally different with the next client. And it creates kind of this unintentional chaos where you're pulling things out of your memory versus creating a process where you're just following the steps. And I think that's where I find so much creativity in the structure. I used to fight that. But it's that type of structure that it's like, I don't have to think about that every time now. I have this process in place to help me.
Totally. It reminds me of like when you first start budgeting and you realize that it's kind of that like step into adulting, right? Where you suddenly realize that if you know what funds are committed to where, then you also know what is your discretionary like available cash flow, right? Like what can you go splurge on? But without the structure of the budget, you're guessing or using your intuition on that. And systems kind of work the same way and particularly when it comes to delivery, core offer, and the onboarding process, like if your core offers are not well defined, if they're squishy and every time you have a new client, you're molding it to fit that client a little bit, then are you molding it so much that your onboarding process also needs to change? Or is it, small tweaks to make it work for their particular use case? I always say, we're all special snowflakes and none of us are. And what I mean by that is, of course, we're all unique humans with very unique businesses and unique needs. And it's not realistic to run our businesses based on providing special snowflake level service at that point in the business. Like when you're in the weeds with someone and doing the deep work, that's the place where you get to address the special snowflake, the unique part of whatever you're doing. In the onboarding process, it needs to be simple and smooth.
simple and smooth. That's what these things are all about. I have to tell you something so simple, but has been a huge game changer for me is, the majority of the world is using Zoom today, right? I mean, that's just the world that we live in, and a great piece of technology that is there to serve us. Before I realized that there were things called plugins, I was creating a calendar invitation, going into Zoom, creating an invite, going back into the calendar, copying, pasting all the information, resending the calendar invite out. It was just lengthy. There's a lot of pieces. And I found, I'm like, okay, I'm a nerd for there has to be an easier way for this. So I researched, I personally use Outlook. So I found that Outlook has things called plugins. And I would encourage you, whatever email system you're utilizing or calendar system you're utilizing, go look and see if your email system has plugins. Because, man, I tell you what, I opened up a gold mine that I didn't even know existed because I found that there is a Zoom plugin for the Outlook calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm creating a new invite within the calendar, I can just say create Zoom link, and it will literally populate an invite. It puts it into my Zoom, like upcoming meetings. It puts all the details into the calendar invite, and boom, all in the same place. And it takes me 10 seconds. It's simple things like that really make a big difference. Also, did I mention it's free?
Right.
Free tool that simplifies my life and makes, honestly, it really looks good too in your business. When things kind of flow really nicely and are simplified, it looks great to your clients as well. It's an experience for them.
Yeah, it feels smoother to you. It feels smoother to them. There's less questions. I think plugins are great. I think we should go down the nerdy route here and just say in addition to plugins for calendar, I happen to know off the top of my head that you can have a Zoom plugin both in Gmail, Outlook, but also in Superhuman. And even in the other calendar apps I've used, like BusyCal, and I feel like Fantastical has one. So pretty much any calendar invite out there has a Zoom plugin that you can connect. So when you're making your calendar invites, you can connect that in and not have to jump around between apps to make your links and share things. So it can be much smoother. And then a lot of the email and project management systems can also connect. So you can take that email that's really a to-do list and push it into your project management system and manage your work from there. Your inbox should not be, and I'm going to use a should here, and I really do mean it. Your inbox should not be your to-do list. Your inbox is not a project management system. Your inbox is a mishmash of other people's priorities. So if we pull all that juicy stuff out of there that needs to get done and you put it in a project management system where you can see it alongside the bigger picture of your business and everything else that you're working on, then you can prioritize more effectively, where it's a hodgepodge of some things are in my bullet journal, some things are in ClickUp or Notion or what have you, and some things are in Outlook or Gmail. Well, how are you going to get that bird's eye view? And I think that's where, for me personally, as much as I do love my bullet journal, I started leaning more heavily on apps. And I'm a nerd at heart. So that was a big thing for me to say, yeah, as much as I would love to have a break from all tech all day, all the time, there's a point where it starts to become more of a hindrance than a help. And I think that that's one of the places. It's being able to get that bird's eye view of exactly what's on my plate.
Absolutely. For me, it closes tabs in my brain because
yes.
when everything is in one place, it's organized. There are due dates. There's assignments to who's doing what. It's you don't have to remember all these details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These tools are here to help you.
Yeah. And I think we should talk about due dates for a second too, because I know from running my productivity community that due dates are a sensitive topic. And it can go a couple of different ways. It's some people love due dates because it gives them clarity. And then a lot of people hate them because it feels like we're right back to kind of bossing ourselves around and giving ourselves shoulds. And I would say that one of the systems that can really help with making due dates feel good as opposed to another should, is that we can do more intentional, longer range planning, which is hard when you're an early stage entrepreneur, but it gets easier with time, and it's worth sitting through it and going through that awkward phase, because once you're able to kind of map your path for the year and have an idea of what you're doing for each quarter, and you're breaking that down into smaller and smaller chunks, you really can give yourself due dates that are actually accurate and reasonable and not spaghetti on a wall that you can execute on in a consistent way. And I think that feeling at the end of the day where you're like, hey, I got a reasonable amount of stuff done and I know exactly what I put my energy into, and it was aligned with my bigger picture goals. Like, nothing beats that feeling.
That's such an amazing it's accomplishment versus getting to the end of the day and knowing that you busted your ass and having nothing to show for. Like, I have no idea what I did. I think I just pushed a bunch of emails today. Yes. I answered a bunch of questions, and all I know that I'm tired and I don't feel like cooking dinner.
So many days are like that, right? And the best medicine I have found is when I find myself in that particular situation is almost always I have neglected my practice of just writing down what I'm doing as I'm doing it, which is very different from writing down a task list at the beginning of the day. Like, I may say, okay, I want to do A, B, and C. And then the second I get into task A, I realize 5 other things that need to happen that I wasn't anticipating, or some client has a thing, or whatever the case may be that catches you off guard. I revert to a different process, which is just like writing down what I'm getting done. Like, today is going to be a miscellaneous admin day. I know I'm going to go from one thing to the next. I'm giving myself permission to go down these rabbit holes because I'm finding out new information and refining what my projects are going to be, what my focus is. I might be coming up with tasks or initiatives to give people on my team. There's lots of things that happen on those days that we're super busy. And often, if we pause just for those 30 seconds to write down a 3 to 5 word bullet around, I did this thing, you get to the end of the day and you realize how much time and effort went into some of what seems like micro tasks. And that can start to alleviate that sense of like, man, what the heck did I do?
Yes, I love that. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good like cross off? I know this isn't a to-do list, but still
Totally.
to go down through psychologically this list and be like, scratch, scratch, scratch. That feels good.
Absolutely. Write it down so you can cross it off, particularly on the days that feel like a fire drill, because it really is shocking. It's one of the things that we find that the community members and Align Productivity find when they start genuinely doing the weekly review practice every week. You know, we're writing down what our wins were, what our challenges were, and, you know, looking at what micro improvement we want to make for the next week. And inevitably, what new members say is that they're blown away by how much they actually get done. And they had no idea because they weren't pausing long enough to give themselves the credit for it.
Look at that. Proof is in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity to get into alignment shows itself in every aspect of your life and in your business. That's what you're hearing from Sandra today. And it's an incredible reminder that really big goals are achieved by individual decisions, individual aligned actions. And if we back that up one step further, those things are possible when you get aligned in your mind. That's the work that I love to guide you with, to help build awareness around who you are and what you're doing, what matters in this world, and what is it that you truly desire. And sometimes I hear people say, Laura, I don't even know what I want anymore. I'm not sure what makes me happy. I don't know what I want to do. And that's okay. I'm here to tell you that you are not too late. It is not over. And every day is a new opportunity for you to rediscover who you are. If this is making the hair on the back of your neck stand up, I encourage you to lean into the curiosity. It would be my truest honor to guide you. Go to lauraora.com where you can book a discovery call. We'll talk together for 30 minutes. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what energy shows up. And most importantly, let's see what next step is unfolding for you. Let's talk a little bit about the learning curve with technology.
Oh,
Because
yes.
I think that sometimes it's not that like I don't want to do these things, but taking the time to research the products and then learning how to use them. And I didn't even know plugins existed. Now I have to figure out how to implement these things. Walk us through a little bit of that mindset shift, or what are some best ways to overcome that?
Yeah. So, first, I want to normalize and just say that I've had so many people reflect back to me, so many clients, that sometimes learning tech brings up flashbacks from like algebra class where you're on the edge of getting it, but you just haven't had that light bulb moment yet, and that can be really frustrating. I've also had it. Or heard an analogy that I thought was pretty accurate, that it brings up a lot of frustration with being kind of mansplained to. Like, you know what you want the app to do, and it's just flat out not doing it. Right.
Mm.
And from a lot of women entrepreneurs, they get frustrated. And that is I thought it was an interesting analogy of like feeling like they're not being heard, right? Like they have expertise, they know what they're doing is important, and the app is like actively ignoring what they're asking from it. And like, I'm personifying a piece of technology, right? I realize that. And also, I just want to point these things out because once we have a framing for where that anger and frustration comes up, because it can go really deep for some people. And I think the first step is just saying, like, it's okay to be frustrated and angry at technology. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get it eventually. It actually means nothing except that it's not working in that particular moment. Right. And the only difference between me and the people that are frustrated is that I just keep poking at it until it does what I want. Right. Like, I don't make it mean that I've done something wrong or bad.
Such a great point. Such a great
Right.
point. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just not working in that particular moment. And that's when you get up, move around, go get some fresh air, ask for somebody else's opinion. And honestly, too, sometimes you'll find that a piece of technology just isn't for you. And
Totally. Yeah.
even if you've spent 5 hours researching and putting stuff in, if you're finding that it's just not working, it it's okay to pivot and get out and find something else, because these are things to help you, not hinder you. And you're also going to outgrow technology, right? There are apps that I used to use that I don't use anymore, and so it's kind of this fluid feeling too.
Thank you for saying that, because another thing that comes up a lot, sort of like, I think we're myth busting here, is the idea that we're just going to get our systems dialed in and then it's like a set it, forget it mindset, which, in some respects, at some phases of business, like if you're past that 250K mark, you've got a really solid offer and you're into scaling mode. Yeah, there are some systems that you're going to get working and they're going to stay in your business for the longer haul that you may only have to make minor tweaks to. But particularly when you're in the early stage and you're figuring things out or experimenting with offers, the odds of you having the same tech stack a year from now that you have right now are like slim to none, because things are just going to evolve and your needs are going to become more advanced. So permission to experiment, permission to play around, permission to hire help. And like, obviously I'm biased, but I don't care if you hire me. What I care about is that people don't sit there by themselves feeling frustrated and bad about it, that they like, it's okay to receive help is something that I've had a conversation around with so many clients. Like, just that permission that they don't have to figure it all out by themselves, that they don't have to be experts in absolutely everything, including technology. That permission opens up a lot of doors to getting support that can open your eyes to an app you might not have even heard of that could be a better fit for what you need in that particular moment.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really all about just being open. Help is everything. I mean, nobody has to build these things on their own, whether it's any aspect of your business. There's always someone out there to guide or to mentor or to delegate to. So being open to those resources. And honestly, too, like from the technology aspect, these apps take time, but I think it's important to hone in on the perspective of, okay, I'm getting frustrated because this is taking longer than I want it to. However,
Mm-hmm.
this time that I'm investing now is going to save me countless hours in my near future. And so giving yourself that space to take the time to implement, to move data over, to figure out how the things interlock together, to call someone to ask for help, like you're putting things in place now that are going to help you endlessly for, you know, for a very long time in the future.
Yeah, it makes me think of a comic. I think it's an XKCD comic, if I'm remembering correctly, that basically talks around how long you can put into automating a task, depending on how long you do it and how long it takes you to do it. And the payoff is surprising. Like, even for tasks that you don't do very often, if they take a reasonable amount of time, putting the effort into streamlining it does pay off. And I think that that's something that's easy to underestimate when you're in the midst of it and feeling frustrated. It's like, am I really going to get the value out of this? What am I doing? And you start to feel a little crazy. And it particularly, I think there is this mark too of like, are you still in experimenting mode in your business, or are more things dialed in? The more things are dialed in and less likely to change, the more value there is in systematizing and streamlining.
Truth, absolute truth. So you help a lot of business owners streamline their approach to work, and you use a phrase called aligned productivity. Talk to me about what aligned productivity is.
It's so many things to me at this point. So first of all, it's the name of my community that I run, and I named it that because what I was finding in a lot of my work with, like, in productivity coaching, like goal setting and planning out tasks, and the work that I was doing on Notion last year, there was this focus on a result based goal. Like, I want to have 6 figures in my business. I want to have 7 figures in my business, whatever your result outcome that you're shooting for is. And not a lot of focus on how is it going to feel on a day-to-day basis as you go from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that that is a missed opportunity for joy and ease and the freedom that we started our businesses for. If we're only ever focused on that outcome, then we've kind of missed that sweet spot of, hey, I'm learning a lot right now, and I can give myself a lot of credit for that. And look at how much I've grown, and I've become a better manager and a better leader, and I'm smarter at this thing in my business or that thing. And so what I do both in the community and as like the philosophy that I teach, it's like looking at our values first. Like, do we value being organized? Do we value being a fit person or a healthy person? Like, what are our values from a really broad standpoint, and using those to help us pick the right results and goals to shoot for in the first place. And if you're doing that as an entrepreneur, it naturally trickles down into your business. So, like, my operations person and I talk about our personal values of being somewhat anti-capitalist and anti-patriarchal, and wanting to, reduce the number of hours we work and be frugal, and different things that drive our decision making in how many projects do we take on for Q2. Could we do 3 to 5 projects? Yes, but we're not going to, because that doesn't fit our values. And it just takes all that pressure off in one fell swoop, because we're so clear about what we're focused on and what we stand for and what we're shooting for.
I love that so much. I especially talking about going from where you are now to where you want to be, because that stretch is tricky. That stretch is tricky emotionally, spiritually, sometimes financially, because it's like you're building and growing and you can see it, but you're not there yet. And
also, yeah, we put a lot of pressure on the timeline. Like, we decide, I'm going to have 6 figures in my business this year, but you're at the end of Q1 and you haven't hit that 25K mark, or add a 0 or 2 zeros if you want to, wherever you are. What are you doing to adjust your goal for the year? Like, what if you gave yourself permission to say, okay, so our goal, we're at 90% of what we wanted to do. So what if we dropped our ultimate goal by 90% down to 90% of the original and gave ourselves some space? Taking the pressure off is almost always a way to inspire ourselves to continue down the path. Whereas if we just double down and say that we're going to make up whatever the gap is in this outcome-based goal, we can so easily find ourselves in this trap of hustling, basically. And I'm not a big fan of that word.
Truth. I second that. I love that. It's taking the pressure off. That's not talked about a lot. Like, you can adjust your goal. That is a doable thing, but it's so easy to get drilled into, like, well, I set this goal, and if I don't meet it, then I'm failing at something, or I didn't do something right. And so, I want to have this 6-figure mark by this certain date. And therefore now I have to like expend all areas of myself to achieve that. And it's like, okay, the monetary goal is one thing, but what about like your whole being goal? Like, to your point, you could take on all these extra projects, but you're going to be sacrificing a part of something that's very important to you, which might be peace, it might be time with the family, it might be good health, it might be lower anxiety, it could be a number of things. But at what expense are we reaching these big ass goals financially? What are we expending?
Yeah.
It just, these are things that I think about, because I'm like, okay, it's other than the money, what else are you gaining?
Mm-hmm. We don't always look at the opportunity cost of the goals that we're setting for ourselves.
Yes.
So some of the things we do in the community, I have these Notion templates that are basically journaling reflection templates that walk you through. There's a weekly version, a monthly version, and a quarterly version, and they walk you through different areas of life and business and ask thoughtful questions that are meant to, kind of provoke you a little bit. I provoke myself with the template most weeks, where I'm like, where do these come from? I think they're channeled basically, because I'll write them for the group and then do them with them. And it's really surprising what comes out when you pause and slow down and ask yourself what's working, or how can I create ease next week? Or what would life look like? What would my business look like if it was easy, or if it was fun? Or if I was prioritizing self-care over, sales. And what I find really interesting is that when I do those things, when I take better care of myself, when I give myself the space, the work part gets easier. Like, we're cultured to believe that production, that producing, that productivity is why we're here, when we're actually here to just to be. Like, we're human beings, not human doings.
Ooh. Oh, shit.
Yeah, right?
Write that down, everybody. Damn. Episode quote. That kind of brings me to, what does it look like to be out of alignment in your business?
Yeah. So I think hustle would be the first word that comes to mind.
Yep.
I would say not honoring your endpoint. So I think having work hours that you are pretty committed to honoring can make an enormous difference. And then finding ways to keep that valve like off when it's supposed to be off. And I think one of the best strategies for that is having a list of things you can do when you're not working. You can't go from working 10, 12, 14-hour days to working 7 or 8-hour days and not have something to put in those 3 to 4 hours that are suddenly, air quote, free. Like, your nervous system isn't going to know what to do with itself. So, right. So it's one thing to say, okay, what does out of alignment look like? It looks like hustling. It looks like not honoring our endpoint. It looks like neglecting one area of our life in favor of another area of our life. So like neglecting your plants or your mail, and instead of having this sort of balanced routine of activities that keep life maintenance flowing smoothly. I think life maintenance for entrepreneurs can be a real struggle, especially if you identify with being neurodiverse at all, then switching tasks, that context switching can be even harder. And so it becomes doubly important that we're taking care of our physical body, like particularly if you are the CEO of your business, and especially particularly, if I can use both of those words in a sentence,
You sure can.
If you're the CEO and you are a solopreneur, you are the asset, right?
Yep.
So if you are the asset and you are not taking care of yourself, what do you think is going to happen to the business in the long run?
Yes. I know the analogy gets used a lot, but it's so true. It's like if you don't put the mask on yourself first, you can't take care of anyone around you.
Oh, yeah,
And
totally.
self-care in business is non-negotiable. Like I know that it's been like, oh, it's fluffy and it's all these amazing like bubble baths and this and that. And it really just comes down to, are you taking care of yourself? And I don't care
Mm-hmm.
what that looks like for you. If that's self-care for you is sitting on your patio drinking coffee for 20 minutes every morning, do it. If it's getting a massage every other week, then do it. If it's to your point earlier, creating actual hours, like honoring your time in your business. Like
Mm-hmm.
self-care is multifaceted. And no two routines or practices look the same for anybody. But if it's not there, it's obvious,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'll chime in here and say there's three resources that we have to spend. We've got time, money, and energy. And knowing which one is the most important can to us as individuals can really help with that prioritization. And I heard something interesting that I want to share. And it's the idea that like if you prioritize energy first, if energy is your most valued resource, then it's very hard for those of us wired that way. And I would put myself in this camp to do something fun when they're tired. Right.
Yes.
And so for us, we really need to prioritize the enjoyable activity first, because otherwise we won't have the energy to do it later.
Yes. That
Right.
is that is so true.
Yeah. So it's thinking about, it kind of goes into defining what your values are and thinking about how you want to spend your resources. And just like we have a financial budget, having a time budget, like giving each hour a job. I time block my calendar. And when I first started doing it, it was a bit of a shock to my nervous system looking at the calendar with like, it kind of looks like a clown threw up. There's like color everywhere and every block is full, right? But over time, I know that if there's white space in there, that it probably means I'm not scheduling something, because I'm doing something every hour of my day, even if what I'm doing is sitting in my chair drinking coffee. So why not be intentional about what I'm planning to do with that time? And also, I will say at the exact same moment that I plan it and then I adjust it as I go. So if I have a coffee break on my calendar at 9 a.m. and I'm in the midst of focusing on something and it doesn't feel good to take it right then, okay, I make note that I need to take a break at some point in the near future. I finish what I'm doing and I adjust what's on the calendar. Like the calendar and the time blocking is not a tool to beat up on myself with. It's a tool to serve me, to help me remember that I really prefer to do laundry on a Tuesday or a Thursday morning, not on Sunday afternoon, right? It's like plugging in those maintenance activities and the self-care first so that my life runs smoothly, and then figuring work out around it makes an enormous difference in terms of how I feel, whether or not I'm aligned to my goals, and so on.
Oh, that is so beautiful and such an amazing reminder that you can build your business around your life, not your life around your business.
So key. The other thing that I was thinking of just a second ago was the idea of seasonal shifts. So I make it a point to sort of reevaluate my calendar and my schedule about once a quarter. And I think that there's, just like with systems, like going back to like the tech and the productivity tools that we might use, there's this expectation that we'll have the same system forever, when I find that to be often not the case until your business grows. But the same thing is true with habits. So in the summer, I would much rather go for my walk early because it's bright out and not too hot yet, and then take a shower and get ready for work and do my planning. But in the winter, it's cold and dark. I don't want to get outside and go for a walk at 6:30 in the morning. Like, that doesn't sound like fun. So, flip flopping your schedule around, and especially if you have younger children too, like that kind of begs itself to give attention to. But I think even without that permission to sort of reevaluate and say what's working for me in this moment, can be really valuable too.
Yes, so much. You started the business to have more flexibility, freedom, abundance, alignment in your own life. And I think, as time goes on, it's very easy to get caught up in the have tos and the shoulds and the hurries and the, checking all the boxes, and it's easy to lose sight, right? Like, even myself, I go through some seasons and I'm like, oh, things aren't feeling good right now. What's going on? And just allowing yourself to take that pause and say, okay, I've taken on too many projects. My calendar is too booked. I realize that I can only do X amount of this many type of meetings in one day, because I can only do 3 because 4 is too many, right? Like, sometimes when you're feeling out of alignment, that's kind of the call to say, let me pause for a second and let me make some intentional shifts.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that there's also like permission and just rescheduling meetings and like shaking things up and say, how many emails have you gotten where the person was like, I'm so sorry for the late reply, and you've been so busy that you forgot you sent the email. Like, it doesn't feel late to me at all, right? But we all write emails that way because our inboxes are overflowing and it takes you weeks sometimes to get through everything. And so it's like permission to just not apologize for late emails, permission to not apologize for needing to reschedule a meeting. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about delivery with a client, the more proactive you are in communicating what's going on and giving them a status update at the same time, like, you want to be judicious about it. And also, it's okay to have a boundary and say, like, I'm not in a place to serve you today. I'm utterly wiped out. I will get back to you tomorrow so we can reschedule. Like, when we're talking about policy and boundaries at that level, often the seesaw is we're either going to disappoint ourselves or we're going to disappoint another person. And that can be a hard choice when we are cultured to please other people, particularly as women. So permission to disappoint other people in exchange for not disappointing ourselves, in exchange for prioritizing self-care, is another piece of the puzzle.
It absolutely is. Literally just last week, I record on Tuesdays, I had the weirdest migraine and I just wasn't feeling good. I had interviews lined up and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be a good host. I'm not in the right space. My body is screaming at me right now. And I asked my podcast manager to reach out to everyone and they rescheduled, and everyone's like, cool. I hope you feel better. Right? Like, we're human beings before we're business owners.
Amen.
Our bodies will tell us what we need if we listen.
And I think that's an interesting comment too, because it applies to systems in my world, particularly when we're talking about working with systems and teams, and thinking about our teams as humans first, and putting the people first, and then the process, and then the tool is another technique or strategy that I put into place when meshing all these pieces together. It's like, where can we create permission and engage with other people like they're humans first?
Yes.
And then allowing everything else to fall into place from there.
And it always does. I feel like we could have like a 4-hour conversation, which is so cool, but I would love to make sure that everyone knows, where can they find you? Talk to us a little bit more about this community that you have. Give us all the goods.
Yeah. So you can find me at thedatamavens.com/gutsy. And I actually have a gift for the listeners. So if you hear this and you're interested in the aligned productivity community and joining us, I think we're up to like 26 focus blocks every week now.
Wow.
It's kind of insane. Yeah. So we have weekly reviews on Friday and Sunday. And during the week, there's a couple of longer focus blocks. But my kind of favorite part of the community is we do these daily check-in calls where you can just pop in for 30 minutes and like do something you've been procrastinating, or do a short check-in template and plan your day. And it's just a really great community, and they're lovely people, and I'm glad to have them. And, I feel like the leader, but also they're my people. So it's a great experience. So I have a coupon for 10% off anybody listening to the show who's curious and interested in joining. And you can find that at thedatamavens.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for creating that. That's incredible. We'll make sure we have the link to that in the show notes here as well. And Sandra, as we close out, I'd love to know what the word gutsy means to you.
I think it goes to that permission that we were just talking about a second ago. Like, gutsy means being willing to create whatever permission you need in the moment to take care of you and yours.
I love it. I love it. I love your entire outlook on business and life and human first and alignment, and really just allowing yourself to be, and then utilizing all these amazing tools to simplify your life and honestly help you grow in so many different ways. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your knowledge.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was a blast.
I know that the words strategy and systems can feel so stuffy, but if you've just listened to this episode, Sandra and I debunked that over and over and over again, because these are things that are here to help you, to help guide you. And sometimes it just takes a hot minute of stepping back and allowing yourself the time to go through the things that you have or maybe don't have. That's why this week's Power Back is all about giving yourself permission to evaluate these tools, to really look at your tools and your systems to say, yes, this is working, I want to keep it. I really need this to happen, but I don't have something in place to implement this. Or this shit just isn't working anymore. I really need something else. I haven't touched it in 6 months, but I'm paying for it. Let's evaluate that and get that out of my plate. So this Thursday's Power Back is really about creating some intentional time for you to evaluate your tools so that you have more aligned tools to help you grow. Connect with me on TikTok and Instagram using @thatlauraora. And as always, until I see you next time, stay gutsy.